The night my brother stood up in front of 35 of our relatives and declared he was taking over everything my uncle had spent his life building. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I picked up my wine glass, set it back down without drinking from it, and walked into the kitchen like I needed more ice. Nobody followed me. That was fine. That was exactly what I needed. My name is Faye. I'm 29 years old and I live in a studio apartment in East Vancouver, where I do freelance graphic design out of a room that smells permanently like cold coffee and screen glare. Not impressive on paper. I know that. My brother has reminded me of it several times, including once at a baptism, once at Easter, and once on a Tuesday afternoon for no reason I ever understood. But here's what nobody in that living room knew. None of the 35 relatives raising their glasses, while my brother smiled, like a man accepting an award. My uncle had already decided. He had put it in writing. He had done it properly, in a lawyer's office on Bernard Avenue in Kelowna, under the Wills, Estates and Succession Act of British Columbia. And he had named me. Before I tell you what happened the morning after that party, I need to tell you about the music box. Have you ever been handed something you weren't ready to open? Something you knew mattered, but you left sitting on a shelf because you couldn't face what might be inside? I'd really love to know. Drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I read every single one. My uncle's name was Clifton. He was my father's younger brother, and he was the kind of person who showed up. When I was 12 and my parents missed my school concert because of something I never fully understood, he was in the third row with a bouquet of gas station carnations he'd clearly grabbed on the way. When I got into the graphic design program at Emily Carr in Vancouver and my father said, "Is that really a career?" My uncle took me for breakfast at the White Spot on Kingsway and spent 45 minutes explaining, with great conviction, why it absolutely was. He ran a small custom woodworking shop in Kelowna. Bespoke tables, shelving, one-of-a-kind pieces for interior designers across the Okanagan. He owned the building outright. He owned the property he'd lived on for 20 years. A half-acre lot edging Okanagan Lake, with a cedar deck he'd built himself, and a view that made you believe in something larger than whatever you'd been worried about that morning. He passed in March, 14 months before the anniversary party. Pancreatic cancer. He was 62. He went faster than any of us expected, and I think he preferred it that way. He hated a long goodbye. At the small service we held for him in Kelowna, my brother gave a brief eulogy. He mentioned the woodworking shop. He mentioned the lakefront property. He said the word legacy 3 times. He said family. He did not say my name. Afterward, my uncle's neighbor, a woman in her mid-70s who brought lemon squares to the reception and wore a brooch shaped like a loon, found me near the window. She took my hand with both of hers. "He talked about you all the time," she said quietly. "He was very specific about you." She was gone before I could ask what she meant. A week later, the estate executor contacted the family. The estate would take time to process. We were to receive further correspondence. My father called me that evening. His voice had that measured tone he'd used to explain things to me my whole life, the tone that meant he had already decided something and was informing me of it. "There's going to be an administration period," he said. "Clifton didn't leave the cleanest paperwork. Your brother's going to help sort it out." I said okay. I didn't push back. I never did. But there was something left for me specifically, a physical object. A carved wooden music box, small enough to hold in both hands, with a hinge inlaid with pale birch wood. My uncle had made it himself. I could tell from the joinery, the way the corners were joined with a precision I recognized from his shop, the kind of fit that doesn't come from a kit. My name was carved on the underside. Faye. His handwriting transferred to wood. I put it on the shelf above my desk, and didn't open it for almost a year. I think I was afraid. Honestly. He was gone, and I wasn't ready to hear whatever was inside. So I left it there and I got on with freelancing and paid my rent, and told myself I'd open it when I was ready. Which is what you say, when you're not sure you'll ever be ready. Then in October, 8 months after my uncle died, I was cleaning my apartment and knocked the box off the shelf. It hit the floor and the lid sprung open. Inside was the mechanism, a little cylinder that played a few bars of a Gordon Lightfoot song my uncle used to whistle, and a shallow velvet lining in dark green. And taped flat under the velvet with a strip of archival tape along one edge, a USB drive. Small black, a piece of white masking tape stuck to one side. His handwriting, "For Faye, when you're ready." I sat on the floor for a long time before I put it in my laptop. The video was 22 minutes long. My uncle at his kitchen table in Kelowna, the lake just visible through the window behind him. He looked tired but steady. He'd recorded it 3 months before he died. "Faye," he said. "If you're watching this, I'm gone and things are probably getting complicated. I want you to hear this from me directly." He told me he had established a testamentary trust 7 years earlier, when the shop had become genuinely profitable, and the property had appreciated past anything he'd expected. He had worked with a lawyer, A woman named Astrid Henley, office on Bernard Avenue. To make me the sole named beneficiary. Everything. The property on Okanagan Lake, the woodworking shop and its assets, the RBC trust account. He said the total value was well past $500,000 and had likely grown since. He said, I know your father and your brother are going to tell you it was informal. Or that I wasn't clear-headed. Or that there's paperwork you haven't seen. Don't let them do that to you. It's already done. Astrid has the originals. Call her. He looked directly into the camera. I've watched them sideline you your whole life, kiddo. I stayed quiet about it for longer than I should have. This is me not staying quiet anymore. Then he smiled, and it was so entirely him that I pressed my hand over my mouth and kept it there, until I could breathe normally again. I backed the video up in 3 places, then I told no one and I sat with it for 2 weeks. The following month I was in Kelowna visiting my parents for the weekend. My father had left his tablet on the kitchen counter charging. I wasn't looking for anything. I went to turn the screen down. Because the brightness was catching my eye from across the room, and his messages app was open. A text chain between my father and my brother. 26 messages going back 6 weeks. I stood in the kitchen in my socks and I read every one of them. My brother had found a solicitor, who told him they could file a variation claim under WESA. The Wills, Estates and Succession Act, arguing that my uncle had been unduly influenced by me in the final years of his life, the evidence he'd cited. My closeness to our uncle, the fact that I'd visited him in Kelowna more than my brother had over the previous 5 years, and the unusual nature of naming a niece as sole beneficiary over other family members. My father had replied, she doesn't know any of this, she won't look into it. You know how she is. My brother, exactly. She never pushes back, that's always been the plan. I screenshotted all 26 messages. I backed those up in 3 places too. Then, I set the tablet back where it had been, adjusted the brightness, and went to watch the hockey game with my parents. As though I hadn't just read a blueprint for how they intended to remove me. 2 days later, I called Astrid Henley's office on Bernard Avenue. The receptionist put me on hold for about 15 seconds, then, Faye, Ms. Henley has been expecting your call. Can you come in this week? Astrid Henley had an office that smelled like cedar and old paper, which felt deliberate and also completely right. She was maybe 55, silver hair cut short, and she had the manner of someone who had heard every variation of every family disaster, and let none of it alter her pace. She gestured to the chair across her desk, like we had done this before. Your uncle hired me 12 years ago for his business contracts, she said. 7 years ago he came back and asked me to set up a testamentary trust. He was very specific. She slid a document across the desk. This is the registered original, the Okanagan Lake property, the woodworking shop assets, and the RBC trust account. Name beneficiary, you. Current combined value, approximately $640,000. I'd seen the video. I'd known this was coming. I still had to look down at the table for a moment. He also arranged for a cognitive assessment, she said. His physician conducted it the same week he signed. He was in excellent standing for his age. We have the full documentation. She paused. If anyone tries a diminished capacity argument, we're prepared. She opened a second folder. Your father filed a notice of claim with the BC Probate Registry 6 weeks ago. He's alleging undue influence and requesting the trust be set aside. The notice listed your contact information as unknown. She held my gaze. He has your cell number. He has your Vancouver address. You were in his home last month. I put the screenshots on the desk. She read them without changing expression. Then she set her glasses down. This is evidence of fraudulent misrepresentation filed with the court. As for the undue influence claim, visiting your uncle more than your brother did is not undue influence. That's not how it works. She looked at me steadily. Do you want to respond to this? Yes, I said. My parents' 40th anniversary is in 2 weeks. 35 family members. She studied me for a moment. One slow nod. I'll be available that weekend. I drove up to Kelowna the Wednesday before with 1 bag, my winter coat from the Value Village on Main, and a folder of notarized copies. The originals stayed with Astrid. The family home is a split level in Rutland, backing onto an orchard that's been carved into subdivisions on 3 sides. From the front it still looks exactly as it always did. My mother's garden, the Douglas fir at the corner, the crack in the driveway my father has been meaning to fix since 2009. From the outside, a solid family. My mother met me at the door and held on for a few seconds longer than usual. My father came into the front hall, glanced at me, said, "Good drive," and went back to the living room. My brother arrived the next morning with his wife Priscilla, who is perfectly warm in the particular way that requires considerable effort to sustain. She hugged me and called me babe, and immediately asked whether I was still doing the freelance thing. I said yes. She made an encouraging sound and went to find my mother. That night I lay in my old bedroom and listened to the rhythm of my brother and father talking downstairs. Not the words, just the ease of it, the comfortable back and forth of men who have never had to wonder if the floor would hold them. Saturday the house filled up. 35 relatives by noon. Casseroles, a Dutch apple cake my aunt drove 4 hours from Kamloops to bring, bottles of Okanagan Red that someone had clearly put thought into. My parents were happy. My mother wore a blue dress I'd never seen before and looked genuinely beautiful. I helped set out napkins and tried to let it be what it was. I had been seated at a table near the kitchen pass-through, well positioned for carrying dishes. At 5 o'clock my father called for quiet and raised a glass of BC Pinot, and said the things you say at 40 years. Gratitude, luck, family, the particular grace of getting to grow old beside someone. He said my mother's name and his voice had something real in it. He mentioned my brother by name, said something about his firm, said community-minded, said proud. He started to say a different name, caught himself, and said my brother's name again. He did not say mine. My cousin Bev, sitting beside me, leaned over and started to say something. She stopped. Then my brother stood. I also want to say something, Ronan said, and the room quieted the way rooms do when certain people speak. As most of you know, Uncle Clifton left behind some significant things. The property on the lake, the shop, 30 years of work. He paused. After talking with Dad, and after getting the right advice on the estate, I'm pleased to let the family know that everything is going to stay together. I'll be stepping up to manage those assets, to keep it in the family, to honor what he actually built. 35 people raised their glasses. I sat with my wine glass in my hand. I looked at my brother. He was looking at the room, not at me. Priscilla touched his elbow and said something that made him smile. I set the glass down on the tablecloth. Going to grab some water, I said, to no one in particular. I walked into the kitchen. I stood at the sink. Outside the window, the orchard was bare in the November dark, the mountains further back, the sky just a shade lighter than black. I pressed my palm flat against the cold glass above the tap. I'm coming, Uncle Clifton. Give me tonight. I went back to the table. I helped serve dessert. I washed dishes. Near the end of the evening, my brother appeared in the kitchen doorway, arms folded, watching me rinse a roasting pan. You should just let Dad handle the estate, he said. It's complicated. A lot of legal paperwork. You don't have the bandwidth to deal with it from Vancouver. I kept rinsing. Do you know what Uncle Clifton actually left? I asked. The air behind me changed texture. I heard him shift. Get some rest, Faye, he said. He left without another word. 10 minutes later, my father's voice filled the hallway. Faye, living room. 35 people looked up when I walked in. My father stood near the fireplace. The anniversary candles were still lit behind him. He pointed at me with 2 fingers. The gesture of a man accustomed to rooms falling into order when he directed them. What did you say to your brother? He says you made a comment about the estate. Tonight. At your mother's anniversary. I started to answer. This is not the time or the place. His voice was flat and certain. You want to make this evening about money? You want to stand here and cause a scene in front of your whole family? He shook his head. Go to your room, Faye. I'm serious. Go upstairs until you can conduct yourself properly. 35 adults in a living room. My father, 64 years old, a retired municipal engineer, with a glass of wine in his hand, telling me to go to my room. A few people looked away. My aunt from Kamloops covered her mouth. Priscilla made a small sound that landed somewhere between a wince and something else. My cousin Bev was looking at him, like he'd spoken in a language she didn't recognize. My mother sat in the chair by the window. She was looking at her hands. I held my father's gaze for 4 full seconds. All right, I said, quietly, evenly, the way you say something when you've already decided. I turned and went upstairs. I closed the bedroom door. I sat on the edge of the bed and I texted Astrid. Can you be here tomorrow morning with the originals? 4 minutes later, I'll be there at 9. Get some rest. I set my alarm for 4:30 in the morning. I left at 4:52. The house was dark and quiet. I took my bag, my folder, my keys. Thick wool socks so the stairs wouldn't creak. I left the music box open on the nightstand, the velvet interior showing, the little mechanism playing its few bars into the empty room. I drove to the Tim Hortons 12 minutes from the house, and ordered a large coffee and a plain bagel, and I sat at a table by the window, and watched the Okanagan sky move from black to gray, to the pale particular blue of a November morning in the interior. I nursed the coffee for 3 hours, and I did not look at my phone except to check the time. At 7:19 my brother texted, "Where are you? Dad's up." I didn't reply. What happened next I learned afterward, in pieces, from Bev and from my aunt from Kamloops, and from one of my father's old work colleagues, who had stayed for a second cup of tea. My father came downstairs at 7:30. Pressed shirt, reading glasses, the same unhurried routine he'd always had. Poured his coffee. Asked where I was. My brother said I'd probably gone for a walk. My father set down his mug and went upstairs. He knocked twice. He opened the door. Empty room. Bed made, corners tucked. Music box on the nightstand, lid open, playing to itself. My cousin Bev said he stood in the doorway for a long time without moving. Then he came back downstairs. His voice when he spoke had gone flat. She's gone. My brother set his coffee mug down. Well, that tells us everything we need to know about how serious she was. It does, my father said. I'll make the estate announcement now. For whoever's still here, he paused. Call the lawyer. Let's get this finished. The doorbell rang. My mother answered it. Astrid Henley stood on the front step in a dark wool coat, leather briefcase in one hand, the expression of someone who has delivered difficult news many times and has no hesitation about doing it again. Good morning, she said. My name is Astrid Henley. I'm the estate lawyer of record for Clifton's estate. I need to speak with this family. What happened in the next 50 minutes is something I have assembled from multiple accounts. 32 people, still at the house. Astrid at the head of the dining room table, where, the night before, my brother had given his toast. My father rose to his full height and told her she hadn't been invited. Astrid said she had a fiduciary obligation to the named beneficiary of a registered trust, and that obligation existed independent of a party invitation. Clifton established a testamentary trust 7 years ago, she said. The named beneficiary is your daughter. You were informed of this in writing by the estate executor 14 months ago. You have been aware of this the entire time. My brother said there was another interpretation of the documents. Astrid opened her briefcase and placed the original trust document on the table. Placed the cognitive assessment from my uncle's physician, completed the same week he signed, results in the 93rd percentile for his age group, placed the registration confirmation from the BC Land Title and Survey Authority, showing the Okanagan Lake property, held in trust with my name on it. Then she placed the printed transcript of the probate notice my father had submitted 6 weeks earlier, claiming he had been unable to locate me, to inform me of the estate proceedings. Your daughter's phone number, Astrid said, is saved in your phone under her name. She was in this house 4 weeks ago. The room went completely quiet. She placed the screenshotted text chain on the table and read it aloud, without hurry, without inflection. She doesn't know any of this. She won't look into it. You know how she is. Exactly. She never pushes back. That's always been the plan. The room turned toward my brother. He said it was out of context. Astrid looked at him with no particular expression. I filed a response to the court this morning correcting the misrepresentation on record. As for the variation claim, you are not a child or spouse of Clifton's, which are the only parties withstanding to vary a will under WESA. Your filing had no legal standing from the beginning. The undue influence allegation has no evidentiary basis. She paused. Visiting someone more often than you chose to is not a legal instrument. My aunt from Kamloops asked what all of this actually meant, in plain terms. It means your niece inherits as Clifton intended, Astrid said. The lakefront property, the business assets, and the trust account. Any further attempt to contest this will be addressed by the court, in light of the fraudulent misrepresentation already on file. My father sat down slowly. According to Bev, he looked, for the first time in her memory, like a man who didn't know what the next sentence was. My brother said my name like it was an accusation he hadn't finished forming. My aunt from Kamloops said, quietly but clearly, Clifton told me years ago he'd sorted things out properly for Faye. He said she was the only one who actually knew him. I assumed everyone knew. She looked at my brother. He told me that himself. I thought you should know. Priscilla left the room. My brother followed her a few minutes later. My father stayed at table and said nothing further, and by all accounts never came back to the conversation. 3 weeks later, after the probate registry formally dismissed the misrepresentation complaint and confirmed the trust documents, Astrid transferred the estate into my name. The lakefront property on Okanagan Lake. The woodworking shop on its corner lot in Kelowna, my uncle's tools still hanging in their places on the wall above the bench. The RBC trust account, $418,000 after fees and outstanding property tax. I drove up on a Friday in December and let myself into the shop with the key Astrid had given me. I sat on a low workbench in the center of the room. The smell of cedar and fine sawdust was immediate and complete, entirely him. There were pieces still on the benches, a dining chair with one leg half turned, a frame started and left. An envelope was taped to the inside of the front door. His handwriting. Faye. If you're reading this, it worked out the way I knew it would. You were always the one with the patience to wait for the right moment. The tools are yours. The space is yours. You'll figure out what to do with it. You always do. Keep Keep the lemon tree out back. It was your grandmother's originally. She'd want it to stay. Love, Uncle Clifton. I sat with the letter in my lap for a long time. For the first time in 14 months, the grief wasn't something I was holding at arm's length. It was a room I was allowed to actually be in. I paid off my student line of credit that month. $31,000 I'd been carrying since Emily Carr. The same debt my brother had cited in that text chain as evidence that I wasn't a serious person, wasn't equipped to handle anything significant. Gone. I kept my Vancouver apartment. I kept my freelance clients. In the spring, I hired a Kelowna woodworker, who had been a friend of my uncle's to run the shop's day-to-day operations, and I started driving up on weekends to learn the equipment properly. I am not my uncle, but the chair he left half-finished on the bench. I finished it. It took me 4 weeks and it isn't perfect, but it stands, and the joinery at the corners is tight, and I think he would have said something kind about it. My brother's variation claim was formally dismissed. His firm asked him to take a leave of absence, while the professional conduct review proceeded. My father called the whole thing my fault. He still does, as far as I know. My mother called me 3 days after the probate ruling. Her voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it. I should have said something years ago, she said. I always knew Clifton had chosen you. I knew he was right to. I should have said so out loud, and I didn't, and so I'm sorry. She stopped. I'm standing beside you now, if you'll let me. I didn't have an answer for her right away. I told her I needed some time. She said she understood, and she waited. On a Sunday morning in April, I opened the shop early, before the woodworker arrived. The spring light was coming in through the large north-facing window my uncle had installed specifically for the quality of it, the even light, the kind that shows you the grain of a piece of wood, exactly as it is, no flattery, no shadow. The Okanagan Hills were just turning green outside. He built this place board by board over 30 years. 7 years ago he sat in a lawyer's office and wrote my name on a document, and had it registered with the province and sealed, with a notary stamp. He put a USB drive under the velvet lining of a music box, carved my name in the bottom with his own hands, and he trusted me to open it when I was ready. That's the thing about my uncle. He never needed me to be loud or fast or certain. He never needed me to push back immediately. He just needed me to eventually open the box. I put on his apron. The leather was worn soft at the ties, shaped to him. I tightened the strap and went to work.